Stay tuned for another Newscenter88 presentation on WMUL FM Huntington. And now, the Newscenter88 Weekend Recap, covering the top stories around the globe, tri-state, and across the campus of Marshall University. And now, the Newscenter88 Weekend Recap team.
Welcome to this edition of the Newscenter88 Weekend Recap. I'm Luke Hamilton.
And I'm Emma Johnson. Coming up on this edition of Weekend Recap, Julia McAndrews will be in with this week's weather forecast, and Johnathan Edwards will be in with a recap of the week that was in Marshall athletics.
Now, onto our top story. President Joe Biden delivered a defiant argument for a second term in his State of the Union speech Thursday night.
I know it may not look like it, but I've been around a while. Now other people my age see it differently. The American story of resentment, revenge, and retribution, that's not me.
Biden repeatedly delivered broadsides at, quote, my predecessor, unquote, without ever mentioning Trump by name. The scrappy tone from Biden was a sharp break from his often humdrum daily appearances and was designed to banish doubts about whether the 81-year-old is still up for the job. For 68 minutes, Biden goaded Republicans over their policies, invited call and response banter with fellow Democrats on economic issues, taxes, and health care, and seemed to relish the fight.
President Joe Biden is ordering the U.S. military to deploy to set up a temporary port off the coast of Gaza. Biden made the announcement in his State of the Union address Thursday, and the temporary port will be part of an international push to open a sea route delivering food and other aid to desperate Palestinian civilians. U.S. and UN officials say growing numbers of Gaza's 2.3 million people are at risk of famine in the Hamas-Israel war. That's due in part to Israeli restrictions on overland delivery of aid. Biden is pledging there would be no U.S. boots on the ground.
The sound of a large explosion reverberated around the Ukrainian port of Odessa as President Volodymyr Zelensky and Greece's Prime Minister ended a tour of the war-ravaged southern city on Wednesday. The Greek Prime Minister said the delegations were getting into their vehicles when they heard the blast. Zelensky said the explosion caused an unknown number of dead and wounded Russian officials, made no immediate comment. The European Commission president calls it a, quote, new attempt at terror, unquote, by Russia. Foreign leaders have made numerous trips to Ukraine, and they occasionally have to take refuge in shelters when air raid sirens sound.
Coming up next, West Virginia could become the 12th state to ban smoking in cars with kids present. Stay with us for a recap of news from across the tri-state when Weekend Recap returns right after this.
So what does WMUL mean by the cutting edge? Well, not this, but this.
Marshall University students say it's not easy being Greek.
Nope, not this either. Whew. But this? Oh yeah. And finally, 0% this, but 100% this.
Got it! Touchdown! Thundering Herd!
So the cutting edge means award-winning news, music, and sports. Not, cutting stuff. 88.1 WMUL.
Welcome back to the Newscenter88 Weekend Recap. I'm Luke Hamilton.
And I'm Emma Johnson. Nearly 3 years after a Marshall University student was killed while crossing a busy street of Huntington, a pair of students had a dangerous encounter with a vehicle at a 20th Street crosswalk. The incident that occurred early this week has given Huntington pedestrians another reminder to look both ways when crossing the streets.
We had a campaign for pedestrian safety because it's up to both the driver and the pedestrian. Drivers aren't expecting you to be coming across. That's the biggest complaint from the public, students crossing, and it gets worse at night. A lot of dark clothing, crossing where there's no lights.
Although Marshall University police have warned students about the dangers of jaywalking, 2 students were injured while crossing the street between the campus rec center and the football stadium. Huntington police say the students were treated for non-life-threatening injuries. In light of the recent accident, students at Marshall have become more cautious when crossing the street.
I typically tend to look around a lot just to make sure I'm kind of watching the cars. I don't think I'll be any more observant though, just because honestly, I've thought about that incident like once or twice since it happened, and it's just kind of gone.
The crosswalk going to the wreck, sometimes people will just turn through even when the lights are flashing. Don't expect a car to stop for you. Just wait until there's literally nobody there. Like, I walk across over here pretty often, go out that alley, and there's no crosswalk or nothing. But I don't ever expect a car to be like, oh, there's a person, I'm going to slow down.
Yes, I mean, it's definitely surprising. It's heartbreaking.
A Marshall professor says that the incident can change the alertness of those behind the wheel.
I think that we could have an opportunity here to really increase awareness about how busy this road is, and for the drivers on this road to be cognizant that you are going through a densely populated, active community who is simply here trying to learn and trying to work.
Even after pressing this button and looking both ways when you cross the street, pedestrians in any city have to be careful because drivers are unpredictable.
The driver in the accident was cited for failing to yield for pedestrians, and Marshall University says, quote, "We wish the best for a full and speedy recovery to those who were injured," unquote.
West Virginia could become the 12th state to ban smoking in vehicles with children present under a bill that has won final legislative passage. The bill passed by the House of Delegates on Thursday now goes to Republican Governor Jim Justice. Violators could be fined up to $25, but only if they're pulled over for another offense. Smoking with children present cannot be the main reason a driver is stopped. The legislation narrowly made it through the House Finance Committee earlier this week after one Republican delegate called it, quote, "just another big government bill," unquote. West Virginia has the nation's highest rate of adult cigarette use.
Coming up next, West Virginia bus driver charged with DUI after crash sends multiple children to the hospital. Stay with us for a recap of news from around the nation when Weekend Recap returns right after this.
Are you tired of spinning that dial and hearing the same old top 40 stuff being overplayed? Do you go to bed at night dreaming of a station that will play music you want to hear all the time? Whether you're driving in your car or chilling on the porch, leave your dial here at 88.1 WMUL, progressive music, and other stuff that you want to hear.
Having a good time. Watching the sunrise shine.
Welcome back to the Newscenter88 Weekend Recap. I'm Luke Hamilton.
And I'm Emma Johnson. The House has passed a $460 billion package of spending bills that would keep money flowing to key federal agencies through the remainder of the budget year. The Senate is expected to take up the legislation before a midnight Friday shutdown deadline, and lawmakers are negotiating a second package of 6 bills, including defense. A significant number of House Republicans opposed the first measure, forcing House Speaker Mike Johnson to use an expedited process to bring the bill up for vote. Johnson says the bill gives Republicans some wins on spending and says Republicans, quote, "have to be realistic," unquote, about what they can achieve in such a closely divided government.
Nikki Haley has suspended her presidential campaign. Haley did not endorse former President Donald Trump on Wednesday and called on him to bring people into the conservative cause.
But the time has now come to suspend my campaign. I said I wanted Americans to have their voices heard. I have done that.
The decision by the former South Carolina governor and former UN ambassador leaves Trump as the last remaining major candidate for the 2024 Republican nomination. Haley was Trump's first GOP challenger and the only woman in the race. She argued she was a fresh alternative to Trump and said it was time to move past his, quote, chaos, unquote. Haley's candidacy was slow to attract support, but Haley outlasted other high-profile candidates, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former Vice President Mike Pence.
West Virginia State Police say a school bus driver was arrested for driving under the influence after a crash that sent multiple injured students to the hospital. State Police Captain Robert Maddie says 54-year-old Jeffrey Brannon has been charged with multiple counts of driving while intoxicated and child neglect. Police were called to the scene of a crash at 6 p.m. Monday on West Virginia Route 16 in Calhoun County. Brannon lost control of a bus with 19 student passengers off the right edge of the roadway and overcorrected, causing the bus to roll over on its side in the middle of Route 16. Brannon was arrested at the scene.
Coming up, Julia McAndrews will be in with this week's weather forecast, and FM88 Sports' Johnathan Edwards will be in with a recap of the week that was in Marshall Athletics. Stay with us.
Welcome to Marshall University. We hope you enjoy your stay. But we know sometimes college students can get a little down. Introducing the cutting edge of all ailments, WMUL. Feeling homesick? No problem. WMUL will keep you company all day long, from our 6 a.m. morning shows until late night alternative. Tired of pinching pennies? Then WMUL is perfect for you. Marshall's very own radio station is 100% commercial free. We hope you enjoy our presentation, and don't forget to listen to 88.1 WMUL.
Welcome back to Newscenter88's Weekend Recap. I'm Julie McAndrews, and now it's time for this week's weather forecast. After a humid and somewhat rainy week, it looks like temperatures will drop, but rain is still in the forecast for this weekend. We will have a wet Saturday with a very high chance of rain. We will see highs around 65 degrees during the peak of the day, and as the night continues, temperatures will drop to around 35 degrees, so be sure to bring out your raincoats and boots. As we head into Sunday, there is still a slight possibility of rain, and temperatures will get a little chillier. We will see highs around 50 degrees and lows around 30 degrees. As we look towards the upcoming week, we can expect some spring and summer-like temperatures for the first half of the week. We will see highs in the 60s and lows in the mid-40s, bringing clear skies our way. As the week comes to an end, rain is expected to start again on Thursday, causing temperatures to drop to the mid-50s through the 60s. The weather word of the weekend is condensation funnel. A condensation funnel is composed of water droplets and rotates while it extends down from the base of the thunderstorm. When it reaches the ground, it is called tornado, but if it stays above the ground, it remains a funnel cloud. Thank you to weatherology.com for that information. And that concludes this week's weather forecast. For Newscenter88, I'm Julie McAndrews.
Thanks, Julia. Now Johnathan Edwards joins us with a recap of the week that was in Marshall athletics.
It's been another busy week in Marshall athletics, starting with the opening weekend of the inaugural season at Jack Cook Field for baseball. The opening series between Marshall and Manhattan started on Friday, March 1st, a day that will be remembered forever in Thundering Herd history. On the first pitch of the first at-bat for Marshall, Trey Hondras etched himself into the history books by sending the ball deep into left field and over the fence for a surreal home run. Drew Harlow got the start on the mound for Marshall, only allowing 4 hits through 6 scoreless innings. Nicholas Wayrich pitched 3 scoreless innings in relief of Harlow, helping Marshall earn the shutout performance defensively. Owen Ayers put the cherry on top of a sweet opening day for Marshall by driving a home run out to right field. Marshall took Game 1 of the series by a final score of 3-0. On Saturday, Marshall was not as lucky with a treacherous second-inning performance from Cola Jimmy on the mound, allowing 5 runs on 4 hits. Bryce Blevins came in for the next 7 innings after a Jimmy was pulled, allowing 0 runs on 4 hits. A similar fate was in store for Manhattan in the 7th, as Manhattan walked 7 straight batters. Marshall racked up 4 runs thanks to the poor pitching, but fell 5-4. Game 3 on Sunday resulted in a series victory for the Thundering Herd with a final score of 3-2. Marshall played again on Wednesday night despite the weather, driving in double-digit runs in a 10-2 victory over Bellarmine. This weekend is also featuring another home baseball series for Marshall, this time against Southeast Missouri State. It was also home opening weekend for Marshall softball at the freshly renovated Dot Hicks Field. The Thundering Herd Invitational Tournament featured Marshall, Purdue, Radford, and Butler. Marshall took victories against all 3 visiting teams, but split matchups with Purdue and Butler. Marshall defeated Radford in the only matchup between the 2 teams. The Marshall March Madness Tournament is still going on at Dot Hicks Field throughout the weekend. Marshall men's basketball played Georgia State in the Sun Belt Conference Tournament on Thursday evening. The tournament is taking place in Pensacola, Florida, where the women's tournament is also taking place. Marshall women's basketball played in the quarterfinals against Appalachian State on Friday. Appalachian State was swept by Marshall in the 2 regular season matchups between the rival universities. As for the 2 Thundering Herd golf teams, the women's team finished 7th overall as a team at the River Landing Classic earlier this week. Casey McIlvain finished 6th overall individually, shooting 1 under par 71. Men's golf, on the other hand, is currently on day 2 of the Sea Palms Invitational in St. Simons, Georgia. The schedule remains full for the spring sports programs at Marshall University for days to come. For FM88 Sports, I'm Johnathan Edwards.
That concludes this edition of Newscenter88's Weekend Recap. Tune in next week for a weekly recap of the top stories around the globe, tri-state, and across the campus of Marshall University.
You can always watch this newscast on JMC TV or WMUL Radio's YouTube channels.
I'm Emma Johnson.
And I'm Luke Hamilton. Have a great week.